been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming, but stood me in good stead. I valued very much my experience and exposure to the tremendous people involved and the involvement in the ideas and the debates and the great policy issues of the day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. Let me invite one of our oldest and dearest members to begin the questioning, David Rockefeller. And I would say, as David stands to ask his question, that David also played a key role in the formation of this geoeconomic center with ideas and with his generosity as well. David?
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, I just enjoyed so much your whole speech, but I was particularly pleased that you gave such a strong endorsement for the free trade agreement for all the Americans, subject that has been of great concern to me for many years, and particularly recently, and I think it's absolutely essential for the strength of our economy.
I find this invisible government, as described by FBI Assistant Director named Dan Smoot, very unnerving. A prominent sponsor and policy setter of the CFR is David Rockefeller. In his own published memoirs, Rockefeller exposes the agenda he and his family have been pursuing in this bold quote. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it. Now add to that this small sampling of the nearly 600 individuals holding membership in the CFR who also hold commanding positions in the world and national media. Many of these names and affiliations you will undoubtedly recognize as they scroll by. Bear in mind that this unelected elite spearheads nearly every aspect of multinational treaties and agreements and then covers them in the media. The history and track record of the Council on Foreign Relations is disturbing. The Shadows of Power, a book by James Perloff, does an admirable job of exposing the power, depth, and sinister nature of the CFR. I highly recommend it. Concerning their authority and intent regarding the NAU, the CFR made this statement in one of their inside publications under the heading of North American Advisory Council. The CFR boldly states, to ensure a regular injection of creative energy in the various efforts related to North American integration, the three governments should appoint an independent body of advisors. This body should be composed of eminent persons from outside government, appointed to staggered multi-year terms to ensure their independence. Their mandate would be to engage in creative exploration of new ideas from a North American perspective, and to provide a public voice for North America. A complementary approach would be to establish private bodies that would meet regularly or annually to buttress North American relationships along the lines of the Bilderberg or Vierkunde conferences, organized to support transatlantic relations. A lot of this really bothers me as an American citizen. An independent body of advisors? Independent from whom? The American people? A body composed of eminent persons. Are they referring to themselves? What is a North American perspective? I have very little in common with Mexicans and Canadians regarding politics. How about establishing those private bodies? Would those be perhaps the Council on Foreign Relations? But of course. Note that these new leaders that they tout are not elected, but are self-appointed. One of them is Robert Pastor, a CFR internationalist of long standing and a key player in pushing for an NAU. One of his first practice runs was the giveaway of the Panama Canal. This time it is the entire USA that Pastor is attempting to give away to be part of a new regional government. The coming North American Parliament is an article about Pastor that appeared in Accuracy in Media. Pastor is identified as being at the center of a vast conspiracy to subvert American sovereignty under the cover of establishing a North American Union. And of course, Pastor calls the charges absurd. But Pastor's own words speak for themselves. He stated to a U.S. Senate subcommittee, "What we need to do now is forge a North American community." Pastor has been referred to by CNN's Lou Dobbs as the godfather of the SPP and the North American Union. Pastor was also a major factor at the February 2007 American University Conference on North American Law. North American law? And whose law would that be? Would you get an American judge and jury? Or a socialist judge and a royal tribunal from Canada? Or perhaps a corrupt Mexican judge and no jury at all? Again, at the very beginning of his essay on integration at this conference, Pastor states that NAFTA can be considered a kind of draft constitution for an emerging region, and then later confirms that NAFTA was merely the first draft of an economic constitution for North America. Pastor goes on to say, sovereignty, in brief, is a misleading, if not a mistaken, defense against an increasingly open and integrated world. He then asks, are the three governments prepared to give up their sovereignty for a wider community? Of course, Pastor calls the charges against him of conspiring to dissolve the USA absurd, especially when faced with exposure of the real nature of his work. World government advocates often hide their real objectives while their plans take shape right beneath our noses. The truth of the matter is, NAFTA's creators admit that the pact was only the first step in a carefully orchestrated process to merge the three nations into a regional government, en route to eventual world government. The Security and Prosperity Partnership, or SPP, and the budding NAU are just two more in a long string of such pacts, including the Free Trade Area of the Americas, or FTAA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA, and many others. We know our own government is an active participant in the NAU plan. The Commerce Department created an SPP page on their own website at spp.gov. When protests began pouring in, they made a second page entitled SPP Myths versus Facts. This shows that they admitted to being controversial. What's amazing is that the content of the original SPP site proves that the claims labeled myths are in fact true. The North American Union is quickly becoming a reality. But does this actually spell the end of independence? Let's answer that by looking at a similar situation that has unfolded elsewhere in the world. In Europe, after World War II, internationalists and elitists quietly formed organizations such as the Council of Europe under the Marshall Plan, which eventually expanded to become the European Common Market. The Common Market was sold to the European people as merely a free trade pact for an initially weak political entity, which became the European Economic Community. Over time, this entity grew powerful and was renamed the European Community, after which it dropped its old pretense of economic purpose and grew into the monolith we now know as the European Union.